Hello and welcome. I'm Methil Renuka, the editor of Forbes Africa magazine. We are here at the Nakasero State House in Kampala, Uganda, to meet with Janet Museveni, the First Lady, who's also the Minister of Education and Sports. We speak to her about the economic prospects of the country, women in political leadership, and their role in powering the economy. But firstly, we start off by asking her about the youth dividend and their role in entrepreneurship development in one of Africa's fastest growing youth populations. It's such an honor to be speaking to you, Your Excellency. It's normally rather wrongly perceived that First Ladies are mere shadows of the President, or, you know, that they only have supporting roles to the President. But how have you managed to rise above those expectations through your work?
Well, for a long time, I agreed with that perspective. I supported my husband for the largest part we've been here. But the change came as I felt called upon to serve directly the people myself. And I always wanted so much to be able to participate directly to serve the people, because first of all, I felt very, very grateful that my family had lived a very, very difficult life when Uganda was in turmoil. And we lived through it all. We managed to come back safely. And I wanted, in a way, to say thank you to God. Because for me, my whole life, is directed by God, really. And so I felt that I had a debt to pay. I needed to help somebody else. And so that's how I felt called upon to go and serve in public life. And I had to go and represent my constituency, my family constituency in Parliament. And that's how I came out and started serving differently, not as a First Lady, but as a Ugandan woman. Mm-hmm. And to serve the people I believed I owed it to. That's how it was not understood initially, but eventually people realized that First Ladies also are individual people. They have the right to also serve their countries in their individual capacity. And so I have really been able to do my own part, but I still support my husband's work from time to time. I still participate in some of my voluntary work that I used to do before, but now I also have a contract with the people to serve in politics.
Aspired to be a First Lady, but can you just tell us what that experience was from the beginning? I didn't even think my husband was striving to be a president, really. But indeed, when he became president, I was made to know that now, as a wife of the president, I have to serve as a First Lady. And it was very difficult for me because I was a very private person. I wanted to do my voluntary work privately and quietly and live a private life, but it's not possible. Somehow you are drawn into politics and public life, and slowly I accepted and had to be what the public required me to be. And it's a learning experience.
and eventually you accept to play the role you are required to play.
You recently finished 1 year as the Minister of Education and Sports, and Uganda has one of the fastest growing youth populations in the world. Where do you see the country going forward as regards the youth, and how are you creating more jobs for them, and in which sectors?
We have a challenge with employment presently, and we are focusing on giving skills to our young people.
Yes.
We have now many universities, public universities, and a big population of young people come out of those universities annually. But also a large percentage doesn't get employment straight away. And that is because mostly many of them really trained to be white-collar job in our economy, but those jobs are not many. So we are now focusing on providing skilling for them so that they can be able to employ themselves. So we are hoping that we will get a critical mass of them to become truly skilled and be able to provide their own employment and employ others. We are hoping that many of them can still go into agriculture and industrialization. We are a country on the move. We are expanding our industrial base. We are expanding our service sector, and so we are hoping that if many of our young people become skilled themselves, then they can enter into those sectors and be employed and also employ others.
There's much talk about the oil economy in Uganda, and also talk that there are a number of women coming forward as oil entrepreneurs and oil engineers. What is your take on that? How are you developing them?
We are planning and trying to really start an oil industry, complete with its refinery. And so we know that a good number of our young people will be able to be trained in the oil industry.
Uganda is celebrating its 55th year, 55th birthday this year, and you're also working towards becoming a middle-income country by 2020. What are the Ugandan economy's prospects, you think?
Well, fortunately, our economy has been growing, and really many of the years in the past, it has never grown less than 6 or 7% per year, and so we are hoping that it will continue to grow. And if we expand our industrial base, because we are still an agrarian country basically, but we are moving into industrialization, and so we are hoping that will grow our economy more, and indeed the oil industry also, as we were saying, and real estate and service sector, and we're hoping that all those put together, our economy will continue to grow. Yes. So we are a young country. We have a young population. The majority of our population are young people, and so we think that really we have a good trend that we are following right now.
You've got a good number of Ugandans, very successful Ugandans in the diaspora, and they're very skilled. How are you seeking to bring them back, or bring them back to Uganda?
Yes, we do, but people who work in the diaspora also continue to compare whether they will come back and continue to earn what they are earning where they are, or whether they are better off where they are than coming home. But we are hoping that as as our economy grows and as it becomes more, it stabilizes more and looks hopeful for our people, we hope that those ones also will be attracted to come home and to work at home. Yes, because we do need many of them. We have many professionals working in the diaspora, indeed.
Yes.
And we need them. So we are hoping that they feel attracted to come back.
You've done a lot of work in the charity and philanthropic space. You helped create the Ugandan women's effort to save orphans. What are your continued efforts in improving the plight of orphans and women in the rural areas?
My time now is a challenge.
Yes.
Because my ministry, the Ministry of Education, is a huge ministry. And so I spend a lot of my time at the ministry. But I still try as much as possible to make some time to work with the NGOs I founded, because we still have those very vulnerable families and children who need our support. But I have a big support group in those NGOs that continued with the work. And so just from time to time, I meet with them, I have some input in their work, but basically they are now continuing with the work I used to do with them.
Uganda has always opened the doors to refugees, and it has always had a progressive approach to refugees. And over the last 1 year, you've had about an influx of about 1 million refugees from South Sudan. How are you managing this?
It's a big challenge, and it's not just Southern Sudan. We also have people coming from Burundi, coming from Somalia, and it is a big challenge. But what we do really is open our doors to them and accept them to come and share what we have. They share our educational system, the health system. They use everything we have, just like Ugandans. Yes. But that indeed overwhelms our own system. That's a challenge now.
That's true.
So we're trying to raise awareness in the world that those who are willing to give us some support should support our refugees through us, so that we can expand on our service sector, so that as we serve the communities that house the refugees, we also serve the refugees together with them. That's how we are going, and we're just hoping that that it will stop at some stage, that we won't continue to get more all the time. But it's been going okay, because we cannot forget that there was a time when we also needed support, and people opened their doors to us. So now it is our turn, and we must make that room.
Uganda has had several successes in reducing HIV infection, and you've also on the road to ending child marriage, I hear. And you also work very closely with the Organization of African First Ladies. But what really is your work with the First Ladies in Africa and around the world?
Our work in Uganda really was to educate our young people so that they know how to protect themselves from HIV and AIDS. Because when we first started facing that pandemic, it was a major challenge, and truly very, very challenging. So what we needed to do is to give education and information to our young people that the best possible way to protect themselves is to ensure that they don't open themselves up to premarital sex, and those who are married to be faithful to their partners in marriage, not to allow themselves to, have more than one spouse. And also for those who live reckless lives, to make sure that at least they use the condoms. Yes. And that changed people's lives very quickly, especially young people. And because of that, the reduction came down so quickly, and really it made a tremendous difference, impact in the young population. But after some time, we also slowed down. We believed everybody now has a story, and they got the drugs, of course, and so we relaxed. But HIV and AIDS is still here. Yes. People still suffer from HIV and AIDS, and therefore, because of that, we continue to educate the young people. Especially, we limited ourselves mostly to the young people.
Neighboring Rwanda has a great representation of women in parliament. It's almost about 63%. But how is Uganda trying to come up with policies in which to increase the participation of women in government and in the private sector?
Yes, we have a big percentage of women in politics. Yes. We have at least 33% of the members of parliament are women, and in cabinet 35% are women. And yes, we do have a big number of women leaders in leading organizations of government and departments, and it is our government's policy really to promote women's leadership, and it is happening. So there are certain areas that can only be represented by women. Like in a parliament, every district must have a woman representative. In addition to constituency members of parliament, there is a specific area that is for a woman representative. So most of the women come through that formula to be members of parliament, and then they are also free to compete at the constituency level. That's why we have a big percentage of women in parliament. But we have really, by and large, I think we have a big percentage of women leaders now in Uganda. And considering our population, that also increases the numbers, because smaller countries like Rwanda, I know you were talking about Rwanda, they have a big percentage in parliament, but because the population is smaller, the numbers are not as big as those in Uganda.
I was reading somewhere in the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor that Uganda has the most number of entrepreneurs. But how are you developing female entrepreneurs in this economy?
I think women feel called upon to participate in taking care of their families. And because many of them will not go for employment in public life, they employ themselves in business, and they are doing very well. In many areas, it is women who are really in business.
Which are these areas?
Sorry?
Which are these areas mainly? Which sectors are they more operating in?
They are in, well, many of them are in agriculture, but they also do food processing. They sell food in the marketplaces. They are in commercial enterprises in towns, even in rural towns. So you find many women are the ones who are managing commercial enterprises in the country.
I'm just going back to your book, A Life's Journey, where you've recounted years of struggle, hardship, fears, and danger. And you lived in exile in Africa and in Sweden. How did you always know in your heart that you'd come back? How did you really cope?
I believed and I prayed and I hoped that Uganda would one day be free. That was a hope that truly had to stay in my heart so that I can manage day by day. And as you have read, it took many years waiting for that hope. But it happened one day. It happened really, I can't say there was any other way. I just hoped and prayed and believed that it would happen, and it did happen.
All those years you received a lot of support from the extended African family. Do you see that in society today where there is a lot of leaning to the African family, or is it more of the nuclear family?
It's not as strong as it was, unfortunately. It has really become much more weaker, and people have become more self-centered, and they do their own business, and the extended family is not as strong as it used to be. Our lifestyle has changed. People just know their small family and that's it. But I can't say that it's completely out of place. It's still there, but by and large it's not as strong as it was when I was growing up. Our generation knew a lot about our extended families. They were stronger, they really relied on each other for support, for a livelihood, for everything. But now it's not so strong anymore.
You have 3 daughters, all of them successful in their own right. Do you see any of them following in your path, taking to politics?
My daughters are adults now. I would like you to ask that question to them directly. I would like to hear that answer from each one of them.
You also mentioned in the book the indefatigable spirit of the president and also his sense of humor. How's it like working with the president?
Yes, I work closely with him, and it is motivating to have him around, because you watch and see how he works, and he works all the time and many hours, and so it just gives you a drive to see that you can't be so tired because this person is continuing. You must also have that strength to go on.
Yes. You've been a politician all these years. Are there any regrets? Is there anything that you'd want to change?
No. No, really, because my public service started very late in life. I had had my life, I had done what I needed to do. I was very happy to serve where I felt called upon, but in the shortest time I have served in public life, I feel gratified that at least I have also added my own brick on the building of my own nation, because I would have felt cheated not to serve publicly, because I think it is a duty for every person to do something for their country. And young countries like Uganda need each one of us, each individual Ugandan ought to do something for Uganda. And unless we do that, we can't really, even educate our own children, that they are required to do something. If we want to see Uganda become better, then we must be willing to do something that will make it better than it was yesterday. So I feel I don't have any regrets, really. I just pray that I can be used of God for as long as I can to serve my country, to make it a better place than I found it. That's my mission.
You have a deep, abiding love for God. What was that life-changing moment when you knew that?
Yeah, I write about it in my book also. The time I say I found God, even though He's actually the one who found me. But it's a special place in my heart when I found God, because it changed my life forever. And now I know that I live my life every day in service to God. It humbles me to know that God expects me also to do something in service to my country. But it also humbled me, and my life is, I live in the presence of God every day. And my work is in obedience to Him for as long as He requires me to do what He wants. That's what I do. So when I found God, my life changed. I had lived a big part of my life without knowing God, and I regretted that. When I found Him, I regretted that a lot. And I was fortunate to be able to tell my children, because they were at a younger age at the time, my own experience, and I believe that it helped them to make their own decisions about their lives.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much for caring to come to Uganda and try to get some information out of me to tell my story again. Thank you so much, and God bless you.
You're most welcome, ma'am.
Thank you.
Most welcome. Thank you.